Hello and happy new year. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a year in review with the 25 most important demand generation lessons I learned in 2025. And it's not going to be about how to use Claude Code. So we ran so many experiments and did so much cool marketing activity last year. I felt like there was just so much to share. I wanted to get it all compressed into one place, and then you can take what you need from it. So we'll start with number one, which is paid ads algorithms are powerful, but they still don't understand your audience better than you. And this was proven to me. We conducted essentially a year-long experiment because the first thing I did was I had a look back at the last 2 years of closed-won data to rebuild our ICP. And then I used essentially a cold audience on LinkedIn ads, which was our main demand generation platform last year, using a third-party targeting tool called Primer. And so it was a completely new audience. And as a result of us taking the control over that audience, we were able to get really good pipeline results using unorthodox strategies. So when I say that you understand the audience better than the platform algorithms does, one experiment that we ran was conversion campaigns. So campaigns optimized for conversions versus campaigns optimized for brand awareness. And actually, when we done that deep work on the audience, we were able to get the benefit of lower CPMs using the awareness campaign objective. And those awareness campaigns then actually delivered more pipeline than campaigns optimized for conversions. So that taught us that the platform doesn't really understand who's in market or doesn't really understand the audience as well as we do. So number two, this one is potentially going to turn some heads, but creative ads are overrated. And it's actually the consistent, boring content that drove the most pipeline for us. Now, what you think of as boring is going to vary from person to person. And so what I mean by that is it was really the tried and true stuff that worked really well for us. So an example is you may have seen some of the carousels we post on LinkedIn. They performed really well on paid. And that was just classic how-to content that everybody was saying is dead when it clearly isn't, about very specific problems our audience was facing. Another example of a format that worked really, really well was just text-only LinkedIn posts using the thought leader campaign type. And, those, again, it was text only. You might think of that as boring, but we just applied marketing fundamentals to it, made it super pain point focused, and that actually performed really, really well for us. So number three, I think measurement is actually much easier than marketers make it out to be. And I think the reason for that is that too many marketers are looking for perfection when it comes to measurement, where really measurement needs to be directional with a high degree of confidence is the best way I would explain it. And so there's a very simple method that you can use for marketing measurement, which is something that we call measurement triangulation. And that's really just using a combination of attribution, lift analysis, and then testing. And you can get a pretty decent understanding of what's working and what isn't when you run that. So attribution is use a tool like Fibbler or Dream Data, for example. That's going to give you an understanding, especially of digital channels, what's influencing revenue, what isn't influencing revenue. You can then run lift analysis. So we actually, again, because we ran this kind of year-long experiment with Primer actually has lift analysis built into it. And so it creates holdout groups in the targeting so that a certain percentage of the audience will see ads and a certain percentage won't. And then it can actually calculate what the conversion rate to pipeline is for prospects that saw an ad versus prospects that didn't. And for us, it was like 15x increase. So that was a strong signal that anything that we use Primer targeting on was working for us. And then the last one is just testing. So one of the things we did at the end of the year is we took a completely cold audience and created a LinkedIn campaign for them. And then we actually used a target account list because it would allow us to understand whether this worked or not. We ran it for a month. And then instead of looking at attribution, we did look at lift. But what we did is just looked at, okay, of all the inbound that came in that month, how many of the inbound was from this completely cold list? And we ended up having like 8 high intent inbound leads from the list that came in. And it was specifically a B2B SaaS list. And we actually had a 50% increase in B2B SaaS leads, specifically high intent leads as well, specifically in that month. When you use this measurement triangulation, it's pretty easy to understand whether the marketing's working or not. Number 4, anybody that's been following me for a while will not be surprised about this one, but the sales funnel is a myth and it's damaging marketing performance. So I think marketers need to focus less on trying to push prospects to accomplish actions and push them through this made up funnel. And they need to focus a lot more on being remembered for the problems their product solves. I'm not going to go too much into the 95-5 rule. I think that's a little bit over talked about at this point, but that's the core mechanics of why it's much better to optimize for essentially the way markets actually work versus this made up, looks nice on a slide deck visual that a lot of us have relied on for a lot of our careers. Number 5, wow, we're rattling through them here. So lots of value in a condensed period of time. If you have a large TAM, improving pipeline is actually as simple as more money into media spend equals more money out. It's literally that simple. I've seen lots of posts on LinkedIn that it's like, you can't just turn up budget and get more pipeline. You can, you just need to do it in the right way. And the reason I know this is that we had a different budget every quarter last year. And there's just a very clear trend. And this is going back like 2 years. In quarters where we spend more, we have more pipeline. In quarters where we spend less, we have less pipeline. It's pretty much that simple. Number 6, heavily branded single image ads are pretty much irrelevant now. I would even go as far as to say they're potentially even dead. I think what worked best for us was content mimicking native formats. It genuinely worked. It had like a 75% lower CAC for us, which is wild, especially considering that heavily branded single images take so much time to create. The best performing post for us last year was, in terms of customer acquisition cost or influenced customer acquisition cost, was a thought leader post that took me less than 15 minutes to write. Number 7, video is kind of hit and miss. So it worked for us sometimes, it didn't work for us other times. Could be to do with the specific content. If you are going to run it, I found that non-skippable formats work best. So again, if you followed me for a while, I talked a lot about CTV last year. We saw huge success running CTV campaigns. I think they were like second or third lowest acquisition cost for us. And again, another one that was around 75% lower acquisition cost than single image ads. So it can work really, really well. And the benefit of CTV is, it's non-skippable, like I mentioned before, but the CPMs are pretty low because most companies are afraid to try it because it's kind of new. And so you really want to be a first mover on that to get an advantage over competitors. So number 8, wow, I'm struggling to count with my hands now. You can tell it's the beginning of the year. The longer something spends in revision rounds, the more likely it is to fail. This just happened time and time again. And it's honestly a lesson, maybe stretching back to the beginning of my marketing career. But everything that worked well for us last year, we made very quickly and didn't run through a sign-off process. The content flow that we actually used was very straightforward. We built out a list of category entry points in a Google Sheet. Then from around July or August onwards, every time I'd write content on LinkedIn, I would just go to that sheet first, have a look for a category entry point, and then write a post about it. We would then port those posts straight over to paid, find out what worked on paid based on landing page click-through rate. And then the stuff that worked, we would then turn into like carousels and videos and YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. Bottom line, the longer it takes in revisions, less likely it is to work. So number 9, I'm going to run out of fingers here and I'm going to have to get my toes out. Marketers aren't talking enough about reach and frequency. Again, coming back to that 95-5 rule, for all the great messaging that intent signal companies have out there, still very, very difficult to know who's in market and who isn't in market. And the best way to guarantee that you actually reach in-market prospects is to target a full market segment and increase the audience penetration and frequency of that so that you can guarantee then that you actually get into or get your ads in front of in-market buyers. Number 10, I kind of briefly alluded to this, but ditch the conversion and website click optimized campaigns. I didn't really work too much with clients last year. There was like one or two that I worked with, and I did a lot of audit calls. Across all of those, I just saw that conversion campaigns and website click campaigns, because everybody uses them, because they're the dominant campaign objectives on LinkedIn, it seems like the CPMs are inflated on them. So you're actually able to get in front of less of the audience. And for that reason, they are much less effective. And so the rule of thumb that we're giving people is to start optimizing for the campaign types with the lowest cost per 1,000 member accounts reached, not CPM, accounts reached. That's really, really important, because that's how you're going to actually drive up that audience penetration. Sometimes you'll see that campaigns have lower CPM, but it actually costs more to get in front of a unique user. And that's really what's most important for a successful demand generation campaign. So number 11, I'm going to use the same hand and go back to 1 here. So website clicks is actually still a good metric for whether an ad is successful or not. I started last year obsessed with engagement rate, but I do think it's still an important signal to look at, but I quickly realized that engagement rate's pretty easy to gain with content that doesn't drive pipeline. If you pick the right topic that's just something that's topical, trending, or just resonates a little bit, it's very easy, or even just something personal, it's very easy to get a lot of engagement. It's not actually going to drive a ton of pipeline. And so the reason I like website clicks as a good metric is, especially on LinkedIn ads, for example, if you're getting a lot of website clicks from 1 to 2 ads and not other ones, in the context of itself, even if you're not optimizing for website clicks, for example, you know that that ad is resonating with people enough that they're actually wanting to take that next step. When everybody says nobody clicks LinkedIn ads anymore, well, if they do, then that must be a really, really strong signal. And I would say anecdotally, I haven't done the full research on this yet. Anecdotally, the ads with a high volume of landing page clicks almost always have a higher number of attributed conversions too. Number 12, 10 and 2. Demand generation doesn't take time. So lots of people love to say it takes time. I don't think it does. I just think that people approach it wrong. Coming back to that rule, if 5% of category buyers are in market right now, they will respond if you get the right ad in front of them. And again, we ran that test in November to prove that, where we took a completely cold audience, saturated the full audience, and ended up driving inbound pipeline from that campaign within a month. And so, yes, that may not be relevant for 6-figure MRR B2Bs, for example. Maybe that does take a little bit more time, but I'm still not 100% convinced. You will see some sort of signal, at least within the first 90 days, if it's working or not. And if you don't, then the chances are it's probably not working. So number 13, this one is going to upset some people, but your CFO is probably right, and you do need to cut some marketing spend. We spent 27% less on media spend last year, and we hit 2x our pipeline goal with a 14% decrease in CAC. And it was annoying when I was told that I needed to decrease the budget, but it also made sense. We're an agency and we're trying to improve margins. And so by being given that challenge, we just had a huge focus on cutting stuff that was irrelevant. And as a result, we're able to get a much more efficient marketing program. And I think a lot of companies, just based on a lot of the audits I've done, are wasting a lot of spend on stuff that is not driving any value for the business. And so, not nice to hear, but it is true. Number 14. Again, this is counter to what everybody's saying on LinkedIn right now, but I actually think more companies need to do fewer big bets. So I see, a lot of the big thought leaders talking about the importance of going after big bets with marketing. And the problem with big bets is they eat up a lot of time and they eat up a lot of budget. And especially for younger companies, you're putting like a lot of pressure on one thing to work really, really well. I actually think the bulk of effort should just be on the consistent application of marketing fundamentals. That's what worked best for us. Just, doing the organic LinkedIn grind every single day of constantly trying to understand audience and what they need from us and kind of serve it to them. Doing that repeatedly across multiple different channels was what worked the best for us. Versus, we did some big bets and probably 50 to 60% of them didn't work out. And that spend would have been much more useful for us, put into actually improving the fundamental marketing stuff that we had running and doing a better job of that. And so that's what I think. You still need to have some big bets. I'm going into 2026 with a mentality of somewhere in the region of like 20% of time, effort, and budget into that, but bulk of time on those fundamentals. Number 15, AI is not going to save your marketing strategy. So we have an insanely well-oiled AI content repurposing engine. And thank you to Kim for kind of building that. But it only works because we know our audience's pains, gains, and jobs to be done inside out. And because we know what good content looks like and what our audience likes to read and engage with on the content side. And so everything really needs to start as deep human thought. Then AI needs to scale that. But if you try and outsource thinking to AI, the content is going to suffer. And I know that because I ran an experiment with it in May where I just let AI write all of my content, and engagement dropped off a cliff, impressions dropped off a cliff, and inbound dropped off a cliff. And I know that it was the AI that was the problem because that was actually a really good pipeline month for us. So none of it I really could connect to organic LinkedIn. So it didn't make any sense. Number 16, CRO is still very important in B2B. I think it got pretty popular last year to say that CRO doesn't affect B2B buying decisions. There's too many people in the buying committee. They've already made their mind up when they're visiting websites, et cetera, et cetera. I just think that's wrong. This is just based on what we saw, but we ran tests and saw some like really statistically significant increases in qualified inbound, ranging from like 20% lifts to 70% lifts in improvement, which for me is just too meaningful to ignore, especially the kind of volumes of inbound that we get on the website. Number 17, email marketing is still the highest ROI channel. Who would have believed it? But only if you do it right. So as was 44X, and I think that's actually exactly in line with the email ROI data that I read like when I first started out in marketing, like nearly 7 or 8 years ago. The perfect balance for us was one, high value newsletter going deep into one of the category entry point problems that we talked about before. If we did any more than that, we actually had too many unsubscribes. But we finished the year with an insane click-through rate. I think the click-through rate was somewhere like 5%, and the open rate was like maybe 45%, if not a bit more. And we also doubled subscribers. Sounds better than it is. We started with 200, went up to 200 in July, went up to 400 by the end of the year. And we're going to push to get to 1,000 by the end of Q1. But that was a really, really engaged audience. It ended up being really, really valuable to us. So it influenced a lot of the key deals from last year. So number 18, LinkedIn reach is dying. Kim knows because I complained about it all year, but the quality of the reach actually seems to be improving. So from around kind of August, September onwards, I talked about this. I stopped optimizing for reach and just spent 80% of my time writing posts about these category entry points. And what I found was that even though engagement and reach went down, the inbounds that we got from LinkedIn actually rose. The amount of people telling us in sales calls that they'd been influenced by the content started increasing. And we ended up finishing the year with somewhere in the region of like 20 times more inbound attributed to organic LinkedIn than the previous year. So I have a lot of confidence that that specific strategy was successful for us. And actually the decrease in reach isn't hurting the business too much. So number 19, this is testing my coordination skills right now. Buyer behavior has changed, but buyer psychology hasn't. So deals definitely take a little bit longer. More people are using ChatGPT for research. Fewer people want to talk to sales. We're seeing all of that just the same as our B2B SaaS clients are seeing that. But what hasn't changed is buyer psychology. So a combination of pain point focused content with a proof of a desirable outcome still works insanely well. And that's just copywriting 101. That's what the best marketers were telling people to do 8 years ago when I started out. And that hasn't changed. And if you focus most of your attention on nailing the execution of that, I think you're just going to be fine in 2026. So, number 20, the average B2B is wasting way too much budget on branded keywords on Google Ads. It's crazy. So I ran 2 Go Dark tests. Neither of them had any influence on net pipeline. In fact, one of the months, net pipeline was like double where it was the previous month, which was pretty insane. I also ran some Go Dark tests when I was still working with clients last year and saw the same thing. No influence on net pipeline. And so I'm now convinced that you shouldn't spend more than about 20% of your budget on branded keywords, if that. And I would test the Go Dark first because it is different for some businesses. But for the most part, if somebody's searching your brand, it's probably because they have really bought into what you do. And it's very unlikely a Google ad is going to persuade somebody not to at least get in touch with you and get on a call with sales. So number 21. LinkedIn ads is still the highest ROI paid ads platform, and it's also the most scalable. So Google ads is lower ROI, and the scalability is pretty finite because you're limited to available search volume. With LinkedIn, you can essentially just keep scaling since there's almost always, for most businesses, more of your market to reach. So nobody puts enough budget in LinkedIn to saturate their total addressable market. Many don't even put enough in to saturate their primary target segments. But if you do get to that point where you've saturated that, you can then just start layering in new segments and new audiences and scale it that way. So maybe I won't go as far as to say infinite scalability, but it's highly, highly scalable. And again, if you follow the strategies that we've talked about in this, you should start seeing pretty decent results within a kind of 90-day time frame. So number 22, your SEO and GEO strategy don't need to look too much different. We put a ton of work into SEO in Q1 and pretty much ignored it in Q2. And then again in Q3, did a little bit more work on it. And that paid off massively towards the end of the year. Towards the end of the year, we saw a huge surge in inbound attribute to platforms like Perplexity, ChatGPT, etc. We also saw that we were kind of outperforming a lot of our competitors in that area. And we never had a specific geo strategy. We were just following fundamental SEO best practices of good content. And I suspect potentially we have a very strong social presence at this point as well. So I think that probably helped a lot too. Number 23. This is more of a personal lesson that I think is applicable to a lot of demand gen marketers. So you need a team. I think, I was mostly a solo marketer until July. I had a little help from Andy, in-house content marketer, but she was also kind of split focused on client projects. It was really, for the most part, just supporting with compiling the newsletter at that time. Then in July, we brought in Kim, who's overseeing B2B content. We brought Matt Lady in, who's overseeing e-commerce side of acquisition for us. And it just changed everything. And I'd thought at the beginning of the year that I don't need anyone else. I can do this all by myself. And then as soon as I brought those guys in, that just kind of flipped for me where I was like, why would I want to do this by myself? That just having those people to kind of bounce ideas off to kind of free you up as maybe a head of growth or a head of demand gen or something like that to focus on thinking about the higher strategy while somebody with, world-class executional ability brings it to life it's game changing. So very, very important one, to the point where, try and move budget around to get at least one extra superstar working with you. I think that's going to make life much, much easier. So number 24, we're nearly at the end now. So you don't need to waste money targeting the wider buying committee until the company is already in pipeline. Most of us have pretty limited budget. We're always complaining that the CFO's taking budget away or not giving us enough. And so we need to just be as efficient with spend as possible. And so I think the bulk of ad spend, around 90%, should just go to whoever the job titles are of people who typically reach out to you. I think that's where the bulk of spend should go. And then you can do a little bit of light retargeting on the buying committee. That works really, really well once they're, already talking to sales. And we've seen a decent lift in close rates of companies where we target the wider buying committee. I know our friends over at Primer have run some research on that and seen the same thing, but doesn't need to happen before they're in pipeline. The final one is very topical. So GTM engineering works incredibly well, but it is limited. At least it was for us. So we launched 2 GTM outbound programs, and both of them kicked off with flying colors and then quickly fizzled out. So it was like month 1, it was kind of like a downward pyramid. So it's like month 1, whoa, this is incredible. And then month 2, it's like, okay, it's decreased a little bit. And then month 3 was kind of like, where'd all the inbound go? So I think if you're going to invest in it, you just need to be prepared for an initial surge that quickly dies off. And I want to kind of be fair to GTM engineer as well, because we were advised to experiment more with unique offers as opposed to just running the same offer over and over again. But that just didn't make sense based on the strategy that we were running. We kind of had the proven offer, and we had some ideas about new offers that we would experiment with, but kind of just weren't ready to do that at that point. And so we didn't. And so potentially you can probably squeeze even more juice out of the GTM engineering style strategy, especially the outbound side, by experimenting more with offers. But for most B2Bs, you're really just running kind of demos. And so it's pretty difficult to put a fresh spin on that in 100 different ways, although you absolutely could try. Anyways, that is everything from me. It was a kick-ass year. Super proud of everything that we accomplished at the marketing team. Excited for what the next year brings. Excited to create more of this content for everybody. And so I'll wrap it up there. Of course, if you want more in-depth guides like this delivered weekly to your inbox, make sure to sign up to the newsletter. Otherwise, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get reminded when new videos drop. Have a great year. Thank you.